Booyah, and it's time for the Game Sports Podcast. It is your host, David McCaig Jr. The Game Sports Podcast is powered by 91 Network. 91N is a YouTube channel. Just head on over to that to hear and see all episodes of the game, as well as other providers on the platform of 91N. The Game Sports Podcast is also aired on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure that you are following through there as well. If you have joined us through social media, that could be TikTok, that could be Instagram, could be Facebook, or it could have been through the community platform called Spaces on Village Media and Soo Today's platform. Either way, wherever you are getting your content for your podcasts and to be involved in the discussion that led you to the Game Sports Podcast, hit that like, hit that follow, hit that subscribe, and make sure you're commenting below to get into the fun and interaction here on the game. So on this episode here tonight, there's going to be 3 segments. The first segment, you just have yours truly with kind of a little round table for myself, if you will, a very short first segment, because in the second segment and third, we got some action pack that is filled with hockey. And in that second segment, I'll be joined by Jordan Trudeau for our newly founded segment, Chuck-a-Puck, which is devoted to, of course, where the Game Sports Podcast is based in Sault Ste. Marie, where we have it as a local-based podcast where we devote to the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds for news about the Greyhounds, but as well as and throughout the Ontario Hockey League. In the third segment, that's where we're going to have our top shelf segment, where I'll be joined by co-host Brendan McCarthy, talking about all things with the National Hockey League. But we're also going to get into the World Juniors there as well with our predictions. So we got hockey throughout basically the meat and potatoes of this episode tonight. But for the opening of the show, I'm going to kick it off and start with some football. Obviously, we will not have an In the Pocket segment this week. Okay, obviously this week going into the holidays, people have a lot going on with if they're renovating their house like Justin's doing, or if you have plans because of Christmas parties like others with hosts, or if you're like myself where you're still going to make sure you get content for your listeners and viewers, but you're going to be starting to celebrate the holidays with wearing all your ugly Christmas sweaters. And I'm wearing one right here. And if you're on video, you get the option to see what that is. This is my Joker Christmas sweater. I got this a few years back, and it's one that I will make sure to wear every year just because of the price that it was and because I think it's awesome. If you don't like it, try to keep that comment to yourself. But jokes aside, we're going to be talking about football to kick off the show. And just around the corner, NCAA is going to be starting. Obviously, it's playoff picture. You make sure you look on to the previous episode of the Game Sports Podcast where Justin and myself had our predictions for that. Or make sure you interact on the clips that are on social media. But we're into week 16 in the National Football League. And we have our pick'em. And our pick'em is between myself, Justin Heichel, and EJ Russell, the main co-hosts of the In the Pocket segment. And I'm going to take Justin's duty today in his absence and talk about the standings updates. And then I'm going to take the picks and tell you my picks for this week with a little bit of a reaction going into week 16. So for the standings for the pick'em, you have Kager's Gridiron Picks in first with 150 points. In second, you got Hike's Picks, the all-original Hike's Picks with 149 points. And the Browns is the Browns. That is EJ Russell with 139. And EJ has had some inconsistent picks this year. Arguably, he could and would state that if he was making his picks accurately, he would likely be tied with me, if not maybe even a little bit more, because EJ is the defending back-to-back-to-back champion. But he did miss deadlines of making picks, and you pay the price when you do that. So right now, it is quite the lead between from EJ to Justin, but also to myself. But 1 point separates myself and Justin as we get to the final weeks of the season. So going to the predictions this week for week 16, starting off with the top of the week, you got the Broncos and you got the Chargers. I got the Chargers in that game. The Chiefs and Texans, I'm going to choose the Chiefs in that game, but it's going to be a very good football game. Just telling you that right now. And obviously with status with Mahomes, obviously with Patrick Mahomes with last week leaving the game and kind of being down as, you know, if he can go, he'll go, is the quote that we have from NFL.com. But he did practice fully, but there was some issue with his knee, of course, last week. So ultimately, it seems like he will go, and that's how Mahomes is. So I think he'll be in the lineup, and that's why the Chiefs will be the one victorious, because that's just how it is with Mahomes. He'll come back, and he'll seem like he would have been injured. He's going to probably come throw 300 yards. That's just how Mahomes plays. He's a battler, and it hasn't been this season that maybe people predicted for Mahomes, but overall, he is going to be okay, it seems like, and that he will be good to go. So continuing with the picks, I don't get sidetracked too much. I'm going to choose the Steelers over the Ravens this week. The Steelers have clinched a playoff spot. but I am going to pick the Steelers. The weeks that I haven't picked them, they won. So I'm going to keep picking them because as everyone knows, I am a Steeler fan. I'm going to pick them to get the dub, but also just no bias. I feel like they play the Ravens well. And after last week's performance, I think they're really going to kind of step up and play a more defensive football game in this game. And they have the task against Lamar Jackson and Henry of the Ravens. I choose the Falcons over the Giants. I got the Lions over the Bears. The Lions had a tough matchup last week against the Bills. What a great football game that was. Bengals over the Browns. Colts over the Titans. I'm going to choose the Rams over the Jets. I'm going to choose the Eagles over the Commanders in a very good football game. Cardinals over the Panthers. Vikings over the Seahawks. Bills over the Patriots in an absolutely big, absolute slaughter fest. Just calling it right now. And then I'm going to choose the Jags over the Raiders this week. I'm going to choose the Dolphins over the 49ers, kind of a hot take there. Buccaneers over the Cowboys, and the Packers over the Saints. And in the Packers game, I'm going to say that the Packers are going to win 24-18 over the Saints. And for the Cowboys game, I'm going to choose the Buccaneers 24-21 over the Dallas Cowboys. The most points this week, the Buffalo Bills. The least point this week will be the New England Patriots. And if you're on video and you were looking, as you see, I was making my picks. I was submitting my picks on the Yahoo app. If you don't have this app, it's very fun to play and go against your friends to predict who you think is going to win the games that week. But for week 16, before I get into that, I just want to say, obviously, for In the Pocket segment, make sure I remind you that In the Pocket is sponsored by Sports Center Bar and Grill, Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario's best sports bar for over 5 years in a row, best wings for over 2 years as well. Sports Center Bar and Grill is the original home of the Game Sports Podcast. Make sure I mention that without forgetting, because obviously we're talking football. That means we're talking In the Pocket right now, essentially, even though it's not devoted as a full segment as usual today. Make sure that we give love to our sponsors, especially if it's local here in Sault Ste. Marie, and obviously a big part of the game family. But the week 15, before I get into a little bit of week 16, week 15, that Lions game between the Lions and the Bills was a damn good, exciting football game. And Josh Allen has cemented, I don't care what anybody says, he has cemented his MVP this year. I know some other players may have an opinion to that, but I think Josh Allen, who's had such an amazing year, heck, he just got engaged to Haley Steinfeld. He's had his engagement. He's having a good football season. Everything's kind of going as planned this year for Josh Allen. It kind of feels like that magical year for Josh Allen, but they've always been really competitive in the regular season. But Josh is playing on a different level this year, and if he could be this consistent throughout the rest of the regular season going to the playoffs, the Bills are going to be a team to watch. And we may have seen a potential Super Bowl matchup between the Lions and the Bills. We could have maybe seen something unique there. I think there's that would be a dang good football game, but obviously the Chiefs might have something to say about that. There's other teams that would be in the mix of that. But again, the Bills scoring over 40 points on the Lions, a Lions team that is injured, right? That has found out they lost Montgomery now longer term. The Lions just can't catch a break with the injury bug. But they do have some guys that are projected to come back by the end of the season. I think that'll give them a boost going into the playoffs. But again, to finalize with the Bills, that was a damn good football game. And Josh Allen, in my opinion, is going to be your MVP. And he has shown why he will be the MVP. So this week, going into this week with week 16, games of the week, you could choose a lot of games. There's a lot of good football games this week, in my honest opinion. The Thursday nighter, I think, is a little bit of a underrated kind of snooze fest, I'll call it. And what that means to me is it's going to be a game that isn't supposed to be exciting, but it has an underrated side to it where it could just be a sneaky good football game for the week because the two teams, Broncos and Chargers, can make the game exciting. But if you look at other games in the week, I really like the Eagles-Commanders game. I think that's going to be very exciting. I think the Dolphins-Niner game is not really a storybook game that you're like, wow, this has a lot of implications and it's going to be the best game we've seen all year. No, it's just two of the same team that are kind of at a stale point in their season, and I still think there's something to prove for both teams. So I think that's why there's going to be that excitement. The Packers-Saints is not a good, enjoyable Monday nighter for me, to be honest. I think that's going to be an absolute slaughter fest like it was or is going to be between the Bills and the Patriots. But I do like the Buccaneers and the Cowboys, despite the injuries that the Cowboys have faced this year. The Buccaneers, I think that's going to be a competitive game. So the way that I say that there's exciting games to watch this week, it comes from a factor of being games that are just going to be enjoyable to watch and overall exciting. There isn't the storybook games like I was saying a few moments ago, like the Bills, Lions, that type of game, but there's still some good, enjoyable football, in my opinion, to watch. And there's maybe not as good as last week, but it's just some good football to watch going into the break, especially with the NCAA football, just with playoff picture a few days away. We're recording here on the 17th. 20th is when things get started. But that has been kind of an in the pocket overview for this week. I want to make sure that my picks are announced and shown and everything, and that it was shown on video as well that my picks were made. But what are your picks for this week? Let us know in the comments below. The second thing I want to get into before we get into our segments that feature hockey in its entirety for this episode, baseball. Look, we talked about it last week. Soto went to the Mets. Absolutely secured the bag. The Yankees, Max Fried, and today, before we uploaded and recorded the podcast, Cody Bellinger was traded from the Cubs over to the Yankees. Obviously, you had Tucker get traded from Houston. Chicago's making some moves, of course, but the Yankees are staying busy. They swing and miss on Soto, so they're trying to bring in ways to replace him. They get a good pit. Their rotation looks absolutely scary. But Bellinger is going to essentially be a replacement, in my opinion, for Soto in that lineup for the Yankees. And he's a guy who can hit 30-plus home runs, who's going to be a consistent hitter. He's a left-handed bat. I think it's a very interesting trade for the Yankees. And I think it's a good move for the Yankees on a team that has some dangerous hitters already with, of course, Judge, with Stanton. They're still figuring out some other moving pieces. If Torres is going to go, obviously, I don't think Torres will be returning to the New York Yankees. But this is a team still that was in the World Series this year. And they're still thinking that they are a team that should be in the World Series. And the way that they're buying, they're being aggressive. And I think Cody Bellinger is going to have a heck of a season, especially playing at Yankee Stadium. I think that is a very good fit for Cody Bellinger. Now, a key point that I want to bring up to the story is something that I saw on TSN, but also through Bleacher Report and Sporting News. The Toronto Blue Jays had interest in Cody Bellinger. Heck, they had interest in Cody Bellinger last year for the free agency, but the Blue Jays are swinging and missing on everything. They don't get Soto. They didn't get Ohtani last year. They didn't try to sign a pitcher yet. Apparently, they were looking at bringing in a pitcher like Max Fried, but that didn't happen. They were apparently looking at Bellinger. If you're clicking on what I've been saying the past few seconds, apparently. Look, I believe that they're in on Soto. The proof was there. Everything was there. Okay, but when you're going against teams like the Yankees and the Mets, and never mind just the money side, just that storybook, it's a little bit different of a pursuit that you have to do in Toronto. And I think Atkins and Shapiro, this is the final kick at the can for them. Okay, and the way that things are going, they may not sign anybody, or they're going to get into a point of where they're just going to sign somebody just to say that they did, which is very concerning. But there are still some available players out there. And without getting into them too much, I want to talk about kind of the strategy the Blue Jays should be facing. Teo is still there. And Bellinger, who the Cubs signed this year, didn't hit 30 home runs, but he will hit 30 this year at Yankee Stadium. Mark my words, I think he'll have a bounce back year. But going back to the Jays, that is a kind of bat that you want in your lineup. I think a welcome return with Teoscar Hernandez would be very interesting, and I think should be taken. Obviously, they did trade for Jimenez from the Guardians. So they're doing what they can to try to upgrade this team. And defensively, they look great. Jimenez, Varsho, and Vladimir Guerrero at first. But this is not a team that, in my opinion, is going to compete with the Dodgers, let alone maybe not even compete with the Yankees and the Mets. So if they want to compete, first off, you focus on re-signing Vlad and also extending Vlad is what I mean to say, and Bo Bichette. You lock up the core and you give him money that he wants. I've said this on previous episode, pay the man for the Blue Jays. They need to do that to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. They still need to bring in support. Bring back Teoscar. You still need to bring in some pitching in the bullpen. You still need to maybe improve the rotation. There's a lot of question marks still, and a lot of the names are starting to fall. And if you don't sign guys that would be an attractive piece to your team, they're going to start trading and start overpaying, and that's not going to be the right approach. They have a very good depth in their system. I like a couple of their pieces that they have, especially Ricky Tiedemann from the minor league system. The Blue Jays need to focus on signing players and not spending an astronomical amount of money. And that astronomical amount of money would have been with Soto, but Soto is a generational talent like Shohei Ohtani, but he shouldn't have been paid more than Ohtani. I don't care what anybody says. Shohei pitches. Soto, in my eyes, I think my cap realistically would have been a $600 million guy, and even that's too much money. Okay, just saying that out there right now. But the Blue Jays want to spend money, and they're in on these guys, and they're not getting them. What's the problem? What's happening? Don't overpay or react or be aggressive just to be aggressive. But why are they swinging and missing on every guy, it seems like? Why are they in on every guy, but they can't get them? What is the reason? Is it because of Canada? Is it because of what is it? What is the rationale for this? I think what needs to be looked at from an ownership perspective. And if Atkins isn't successful this year, never mind just Atkins, there's going to be a full clean house with the Blue Jays, because when they had this young team before the COVID bubble all kicked in, this was the window where we thought we'd see some extra extended baseball coverage with the playoffs and seeing a championship if you're a Blue Jay fan, which everyone knows that I am. But if you would have told me that the Tigers would be ahead of the Blue Jays at this time, that's not something that I would have predicted. So it's been not successful. They haven't had good playoff runs. This choke against Seattle, the Minnesota games were an absolute joke. There was a lot of immaturity there. This team needs to have a season if they want to stay together, if they want to be here, because if it isn't successful this year, this is the year the Jays, if they are not successful, might create more painful years because of if you re-sign Vlad or not, or whatnot, or if you overspend on a player. I want to see Atkins be smart, and you should if you're a Blue Jays fan. But overpaying, is that the answer? No. But bringing in the right guys and keeping the guys to keep that integrity in the organization. You have Vlad, Bo, re-sign them and bring in guys that are going to be impactful players, but you keep swinging and missing on guys. What is happening? Figure out a way to bring in guys to help attract more players to go play in Toronto. And Lenny, last baseball news, or the last piece of baseball news, that I want to get into, and it's kind of a topic that I'm going to save for when we have Connor back on the show. But I want to talk about Tropicana Field, the Trop in Tampa Bay. Obviously, they're going through a lot there in Florida, but there's been a lot of discussion about home games, split games, Montreal, all that happening. Talk of different expansion. Look at Oakland, leaving Oakland, all this happening. I think that Tampa should be relocated to Montreal and the Expos should be put back in the MLB with two Canadian teams. Creates a Canadian team rivalry. They play in the same division. You have the Yankees and Red Sox there. You're going to bring more money over to Canada to that international game. Look, I think they should bring a team back to Montreal, and that team to go there should be the Tampa Bay Rays. The Tampa Bay Rays they don't have a standard, an effective field. I feel like the fans obviously are not as bought in as they should be, where Montreal fans would be ecstatic to have a team back. Bring back the Expos. I'm telling you right now. Any other news for baseball we'll get into as the winter goes along, as we lead up to the summer, as more names are going to be signed and getting traded. Obviously for Bellinger today, for the Yankees, right-handed reliever Cody Poteet goes to the Chicago Cubs in that trade. Obviously Bellinger had an off season, and there's some pretty pricey tag that the Yankees are taking over, but I'm very curious to see how Bellinger does in that Yankee lineup. I think he's going to have a very good bounce back season for the Yankees. Just calling it right now. All right, this has been the opening segment where I talked in the pocket in a brief way, and then obviously baseball. I'm going to take a quick breather. When I come back, Jordan Trudeau is going to be joining me for the Chuck-a-Puck segment, where we're going to be talking about OHL, and obviously with the center of that podcast segment, of this podcast, being devoted towards the Soo Greyhounds. You don't want to miss it. Be right back. Welcome back to the Game Sports Podcast. David McCaig continuing to host you this evening. We are now in the Chuck-a-Puck segment. I am joined by Jordan Trudeau. Trudes, my friend, great to see you. Third straight week. We're Christmas and the holidays just around the corner. It is fantastic. We have our break coming up in a couple weeks, but don't worry, we're still going to have clips as news happens with either the Hounds or the World Juniors, just so the viewers and listeners know that you won't be not hearing from us throughout the 2 weeks if nothing happens. But nonetheless, Trudes, how are you, my friend? And great to have you on again here tonight.
Yeah, good, Dave. How are you?
Doing great, man. I look forward to this a lot. I look forward to seeing you. And I don't say it to the other guys as much as I probably should. Okay, but this segment that we have, I think, is so great. It's unique. It's something that you don't see in Sault Ste. Marie, and we're glad to bring it to those that if it's from the Facebook page, if it's from if through Spaces, through Village Media Today, either way, to give them a secondary platform other than their phones between their friends to react and listen to what we talk about. Obviously, we want to upload as many clips as we can, and we have only been able to upload a couple, in particular to the Facebook page for the fan page. But obviously, we were expecting a guest this week, but that got rescheduled till after the holidays. And it's a very unique time in the Ontario Hockey League because the roster freezes this week before obviously the World Juniors kicks off, which obviously Canada has its first game on a Boxing Day officially. So it's a busy time around the junior hockey ranks, and the Hounds just wrapped up and I'll give you the floor for that to talk about this past week leading up to before now being in the break, because they don't have a game until while they play on the 18th and the 20th, they play on the road. So they played at home, sorry. Those were their last home games before the break is what I meant to say. So they have 2 road games before they go on their Christmas break, because then they're off until the 28th of December where they host Windsor here at home. So Trudes, a lot to get into this on this segment overall. So in such little time, why don't you, before we get into the roster freeze and Gibson and players potentially being traded and trades in the Ontario Hockey League that did happen today as we're recording, it's December 17th at 7:15 p.m. if everyone's curious. Now, let me know about last week, though. The Hounds, they had their last little stretch of home games before the holidays. How do you think last week went? Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say thanks again, Dave, for having me on. I look forward to this too. This is becoming a good part of my week.
Love that.
And obviously I'm a very passionate fan and like follower of the OHL and the Greyhounds. So
and you worked for them. You worked for
them. I did. And that was a great experience. Maybe sometime I can talk about that too, because that was like a dream come true for, a kid from the Soo that spent his winters playing hockey and going to the Gardens to cheer on the Hounds. I still remember the old GFL.
Oh, man, the Memorial Gardens, man.
Memorial Garden. So, that was a dream come true in its own right, where I didn't actually get to play for the team, but I got to work for them. So yeah, hope everyone's enjoying the show. And yeah, I'm excited to have others on here that want to come on, because
come on in, local guest. This show is going to be segments local. It's Hounds. It's local guests. You're a fan.
Yeah.
Obviously on the show, we've had a lot of great, known hockey players come on the show. And, we've had, that is for our top shelf and our special edition segments. Those are for that platform and that piece of the show. That's where we'll do those interviews. This segment of the show is dedicated and devoted to the Hounds, is the words devoted to, with that OHL flavor of news, but to have that interaction with the local community, to give you a platform to come talk on and have comments about, okay? But keep the comments appropriate, please. They have been, I'm not saying they haven't been, they've been good, but please keep that up, because obviously you can have an opinion, you can chirp us, you can chirp, you can whatever you want to do. You can just,
Sioux fans, we know how we all Sioux fans are, right?
Oh yeah. It's passionate,
passion. It's passion. And this upcoming time is huge. Yeah, it's really important times for junior hockey, and it's an exciting time. So yeah, this past weekend they went 1-2, won one, lost one. So that puts them to 2-8 in their past 10. So in Greyhound standards over the past few years, not good at all, right? So a couple of my notes from this past weekend, again, we mentioned this last week, they're struggling to keep the puck out of their own net. Both goalies, they struggled a little bit, so each one was pulled this past weekend in back-to-back games. But I think a lot of the goals that we saw, a lot of the goals against, really stemmed from turnovers, defensive zone breakdowns and odd man rushes.
Yeah.
I wasn't really looking too much at the goalies like I've done in the past. When I've been critical of Miller or Schenkel, being okay, that was a bit of an easy one. Should have had that one maybe. Or you see Dean come on in some articles, he say, yeah, Landon should have had those two and we lost 4-3. I think what we're looking for right now, or what I looked at, was those three things: turnovers, defensive zone breakdowns, not picking up guys in defensive zone, and giving up a lot of odd man rushes. Yeah. One thing I really noted was their neutral zone forecheck, their structure in the neutral zone forecheck. I don't know about a lot of other Hounds fans, I found that a lot of times I would see almost little to no pressure on an opposing puck carrier from their blue line all the way into the Greyhounds end. So like that's very, very difficult. Like that gap control, is huge, Dave, right? So like just allowing that time and space, I think that just needs to get tightened up. But all in all, like all that is characteristic of a young team, right? And like we've talked about, Gibson is gone. He's gone for good now. There are still moves to be made, but the bulk of the answer right now is already in the dressing room. So they have, with Chase Reed signing, they signed him last week. The day of they announced, the day of the Wednesday game, he's now their ninth 17-year-old. So
Young youth movement.
very young team. The 17-year-old, and he's 6 feet. He's committed to Michigan State. He was a former late round pick. And, you kind of got to give props to him and Hunter Solomon, who have been playing top 4 minutes. Yeah. So they've stepped up in that top 4 in those top 4 pairings with Brody McConnell-Barker and Caden Carlisle. And as 17-year-old players in a 19, 20-year-old heavy league, that's really huge for their development. Yeah. And like, they're not perfect by any means, but what a huge step for them to get those type of minutes at a young age. And they're doing a great job. So,
and you know what? The youth movement may not always be a popular thing, and obviously we haven't seen an OHL championship. We were close to it. Obviously, we have the sign when you enter the Sault Ste. Marie about the Memorial Cup, obviously in the 90s, and how storybook and historic that team is. Okay, but obviously we've seen a lot of good teams with the Soo Greyhounds. This team does know how to develop. The history of there with drafting and having talent and being a competitive team has been frequent that we've seen. But seeing this young team and this youth movement excites me as a Greyhound fan, and just as a part of the local community, because I know what the future is going to take if you're patient with these players and you allow them the time to develop, but you put them around some good veteran players as well. But this is going to be a growth opportunity for a lot of those young guys, the Soo Greyhounds, to take steps forward. And next year, we're going to see the benefits of them being that year older and what it's going to pay off to be next year. Do I see them winning next year? No, I don't see that. But the year after that, I think things could start being into serious contention, right? Where we can see that 2-year window where the Hounds could be in that upper threshold in the conference, in the league, and also potentially being OHL champions, if not debuting and getting back to the Memorial Cup. So that is what the goal is now. You have to understand as a team where you stand. You're not in the upper threshold. You're not a team that is going to win the OHL championship this year. And you have to sell and you have to make moves. This weekend, yeah, this was the last weekend where, we see probably some of the faces that we've seen. They're likely that there's going to be trades. And obviously Trudes and I are recording this before the freeze and before the World Juniors. And as trades happen, if trades happen this week or as things come up throughout the break, we will break that news on here for you and give you that interaction opportunity. But this is a team that I'm excited to see what they do during these next few weeks, or this week alone, but also after the freeze, what happens, because it's pivotal. And speaking of that, I'm just going to read up, and people see me looking at a screen. I want to make sure that I quote the right trades of what happened. Okay. So London got Cam Allen from Guelph. All right. He was the leader on Guelph. Very good trade. They got a couple 2nd round picks. They had a couple 3rd round picks. They had a couple 4th, and they got a 5th. Obviously different years. There's some 26 in there, some 25, some 27, some 28s ranged out between the picks, but they got a haul for Cam Allen, did Guelph, and as London paid that up. And let me tell you this, obviously London is a team that always seems to be successful, but that is the type of trade that we're going to see that might mirror what's going to happen with Andrew Gibson. Okay. But I was talking to Trudes about this offline. This is something that I actually think Gibson has the opportunity to get more. I'm more of a Gibson fan than I would be Allen. Another trade obviously would, so Guelph has also that they've acquired Justin Botno from the Kitchener Rangers for a 5th round pick. That's another trade that was posted. And also today, Guelph has traded their import for forward Vilmer
Ulrichsen. Yeah, the Ulrichsen trade. Yeah.
To Brampton. Okay. So Guelph has gotten into the roster freeze and these trades were posted as obviously throughout Guelph's X page, as well as the OHL website, but also through the Soo Greyhounds fans club page on Facebook is where that was posted. There's just a couple listed there, Trudeau.
Yeah. Guelph's been very active. All 3 trades they've been involved in so far.
Yeah.
So that two of those trades impact the market for the Greyhounds, right? So Ulrichson's an import
Yep.
player, and he went for a second and 2/3. You're looking at it, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So obviously he's a 19-year-old import, and so that kind of, unless Brampton is gonna, double up on imports, that probably negates Nord going there.
Yep.
But that's the type of market you would see for a 19-year-old import right there. So that would be comparable. That return for Ulrichson would be a comparable return for Nord, which is, I think that's a pretty fair deal for an import player.
Yep.
That's 19. And that's NHL drafted.
Yep.
So like that's similar. That would be a similar market. Similar market for Gibson too. So Allen, that haul that Guelph acquired for Allen, that 2 seconds, 2/3, and then Noah Jenkin, the 07 defenseman.
Forgot to add that. Yep.
Oh yeah, like that's the type of trade that you're looking at as a Greyhound fan. Like that should get you pretty excited, because we already have 9 07, which is 17-year-old sophomore players. We already have 9 of them. So that market,
that's a lot of not. That's so everyone knows that's a lot.
That's a lot of 17. Like that's a really, really good core group of 17-year-old players that you can move forward with, because they have 3 or 4 years left. A lot of those players. So like, so that type of trade now for Gibson would be very, very similar, if not a little bit more, because he might be valued a little bit more than Cam Allen.
I think so. And that's, again, no bias.
Team Canada, right? But he made Team Canada. He's a higher NHL pick. I don't know. But anyway, the market's the same. Like it would be the same. So, Kyle Raftis is looking for at least 2 seconds, 2/3, and a young player for Gibson. And then whatever change is left over.
A young, ready player that comes up into the lineup and be a big part of their future.
Probably an 08. I would predict, because they already have a solid 07 group.
Yep.
And they're probably looking at, I think they're probably looking at an 08 to go along with some picks for Gibson, because I think they only have one right now, Carson Andrew.
See,
because all the other ones didn't report. He only had one 08 report out of the first 5 rounds of picks, which was very, very, everybody was criticizing the GM for that draft. Yeah. Right. So
you got to try to repair that. You got to try to, to replenish that,
which could pretty much repair itself now, because with the new NCAA agreement.
Yes. And that agreement can go both ways. I know there's like and there's not like about it. I understand both takes, but as a former hockey player, I didn't play NCAA, just so everybody knows. My highest was trying out at a Hound camp, so then Thunderbirds level. So I haven't had that experience, but I can tell you there's a lot of people that I know, even me, if I was thinking I was going to make an OHL team, you have to make that decision if like OHL or NCAA, right? You have to make that decision. And for me, if people know who I am, jokes aside, school wasn't always something I focused on. So I probably would have went the other side, as everyone would say, if I had the decision. But there's a lot of people that I know, Brett Perlini, some guys, just name a few, or name one of the guys. Sorry, I don't want to go through the list, but guys that went to play NCAA hockey. Right. And that made that was appealing. I thought it was really cool that he decided to take the jump and go play, obviously, for Michigan State. Very cool. Right. Obviously, there's a few friends of mine that played in the O. Some of them made the NHL. Colin Miller was one of them, who's still playing for Winnipeg. Either direction that you go, but now the opportunity for both and having that agreement is really cool to see. We talked about that more last week. And when we have Peter Florio, we'll say the name of the guest who is going to be coming on soon. I'm sure he'll have his opinions on that too. So we'll dive into that topic more. Back to the trade deadline, though, the roster freeze prior to the deadline that is upcoming. I think this sets the tone for the roster, but I think it's fair to say, Trudes, and I'm going to make the prediction right now. I don't think the Hounds make a trade before the roster freeze.
That's what you're predicting?
I think if they're going to move anyone, it's Nort. I think that they might move their import forward. They might maybe move if they get an absolute.
Owen Allard has been day-to-day. He's been listed as day-to-day. So he's missed the past few games, and there hasn't been a lot of information released about his injury. So the reason I do that in quotations is because like there's no other real details on it. So that could point to a potential trade,
Yeah.
but like we can't say for sure. It just seems like a really big coincidence,
Coincidence.
right?
Yeah.
So like, but then again, you got to remember too that Nord and Allard are both they're both owned by Utah. Like their NHL rights belong to Utah, right? So they could also have like
Simple.
a say in, well, we want them to stay together, which could, potentially be like tough on Kyle Raftis if he's receiving that pressure. Obviously it's just speculation,
And that
but like
does happen.
it
You
makes
folks,
sense,
that does
right?
happen.
It makes sense. So like that could be a little difficult to find a deal for them both because one's an OA, one's an import. Like, so
Yeah.
I don't think it's impossible. I think they're two really, really good players, and a contending team would would find a way to get them both on their roster. But like, yeah, I don't know.
I don't
I'll
think it's
challenge your
the
prediction.
challenge. Okay. I just think,
Challenge your prediction.
especially
I
for Gibson.
want to say, well, Gibson. Yeah, Gibson can't. Gibson can't get traded, but
Yeah.
I will say they might trade Owen Allard
Okay.
within the next day or two.
If they wait, do you not think they would maximize their value more for a team that might be a little bit desperate on pulling the trigger now? If they say, hey, no, okay, we want this. Oh, we don't know if we want to pay that. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
That's a
I'd say
risk, but
so. I'd say so. Yeah, like as it gets closer to the deadline, the risk you run with that as well, though, is that you run out of buyers, right? So,
yeah,
like if you're playing that game, then and if people pick up, like if other teams pick up, other assets, and then you run out of buyers, you kind of then the price is kind of fixed, right? Because if there's only one buyer and they know you kind of got to unload, then the kind of the ball is in their court, no pun intended. But I think yeah, but I think Gibson will be like, there's going to be a bit of a bidding war there.
yeah,
Now that London's out, so that's important too. London's out of the run for Gibson.
yeah.
They got their defensive upgrade, so that leaves Kingston, Oshawa, who at the top of the Eastern Conference and are looking to buy, or will be looking to buy, and then possibly Brampton too, because Brampton's already, they got Ulrichsen, so they're already in buy mode. So I think one of those three teams would be. I'm not sure who would be buying in the West other than London. Windsor could, but they're still young, and then
They might want to not
Kitchener,
the future for that. They might want.
yeah, like Kitchener. I don't know. Like London. Well, do you want to go up against London? I guess right now, Cowan, Barkey, Dickinson. Now they have Allen. Yeah, they went to the Memorial Cup last year. They pretty much have the same team. Jacob Julian, like, so they got a really solid team. So
I think
it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting deadline.
you got to think that I've said, I know Windsor was one that I had my eye on to wait to see if they're going to do something, but because they have some assets, I think that Raftis would like to get, but it depends if Windsor would part from those pieces, right? So you got to think Windsor's got to be in that top three of pushing, but you got to think that Kingston and Oshawa are pushing, especially if they're in that pressure to buy now and win now, especially with London paying what they did. If they want to upgrade their team and try to be a step ahead or in line, they're going to have to do something. And interesting, like I know it happened with Radish going to the Hounds, but in that freeze where it didn't happen, people knew that Radish was going to be a Greyhound. His jersey, I think, was getting stitched here.
Yeah,
leaked information that his jersey was getting stitched here.
He had a picture, I think, with a Greyhound jersey on at the gold medal party dinner or whatever. I think I remember that going around. Yeah.
So like it was no.
I mean, it gets out, right? Word gets out, and then so yeah, we could see the rumors start to fly. Near the end of the World Junior Championship, where Gibson is going.
I just like that what Gibson's playing right now. He's projected to play top pairing in the World Juniors.
I saw that. Yeah, no, that's really good for him.
So that's why that value is
Yeah.
I almost would, and people won't like this, take the risk of waiting. I almost would, because you know
Oh,
you're going
for
to
sure.
sell him. You know he's going to get sold. You can wait on him. I think with Allard and Nord, there's kind of unique. You could just kind of field out the range right now, and if you get something great. But I think that everything is in the Hounds. They have the assets that the teams want with Allard, Nord, and with Gibson, of course, even Charlie and that. I think teams should be looking there too. Like they have some pieces where they can just rake in draft picks right now and some young prospects and really build off this young core that they have. It's exciting times. I think, despite not being a very impactful team this year, and I see a lot of posts on Facebook, right, where they're like, "This team is soft. This team is this. This team." This is a team full of young kids. People,
Very young for the OHL.
why don't we, like, I'm going to put this back in the people that do have the negative comments. Positivity. Look, passionate fan base. I get it. And look, I'm a sports guy doing a sports podcast. I've been doing sports for over a decade on radio and doing it on this show. I understand talking about certain players and giving your opinion. I understand it more than anybody. Trudes knows how opinionated I am. But besides that point, these are kids that are 17 years old. Put yourself back when you were 17. And this pressure it is in your life, pivotal points in their life to determine that education, complete that education, but also maintain the mind frame to be a successful to be a successful hockey player to try to accomplish their goal of playing professional hockey. Okay. So like when I see that this team is soft or this team is, you know what? It's not like the times where we saw the big rugged guys, like even not as tough as they were, or that team that made it in the finals with Kachuk and Radish and all that stacked team that used to grind, hit, get goals. I understand it's a little bit different, but that's what a rebuilding team is. And what I want to see with a rebuilding team is strides forward. Players that have a work hard mentality, that play with the fire up their ass. And guess what? This team that I have seen and I missed, and I swore, there's the one swear this episode that I got to get the free card. Throw get a card. There you go. Red card in the air now.
Throw the puck.
Yeah, they throw the puck, the invisible puck. I got to start putting one up here and throwing it.
I forgot to get one. I meant to get one this past, and
But they do play with fire. I missed the games this weekend. I wasn't able to attend this weekend, so I was really relying on some feedback and videos and yourself. But it's I do see a team that does really try to compete as best as they can. There's flaws in their game. But this is what will happen with a young team. True.
Yeah. I liked their Niagara. I thought they were a bit flat. I thought like they didn't have a lot of energy. They couldn't get a lot going against Niagara. That Niagara team, I kind of got to give them credit. They're a lot better than I thought they were.
Yeah.
Like and I looked at their record after the game because I only I didn't know their exact record because I don't really keep an eye as close an eye on the East, but they're 20-9. Like they're 20-9. Like they had a solid first half. Yep. So like, and they got some good players on that team. So still like you're looking at the Hounds roster, you're looking at what they can do, and the expectation is still high. It's a winning culture. And like, I would think that they do play with fire. They do. And you mentioned like the 2018 team, like, yes, people do want to see that. I think what the fan base really, really wants to see, and they have a really good chance, and I hope the organization, follows through on this. They have a really, really good opportunity here to build around, and we've talked about this, to build around that 07 core, mainly Brady Martin, mainly Travis Hayes, Landon Miller. So like, I think really what the fan base is calling for is, yes, please, go through a rebuild phase, and we'll take our bumps now if we can get rewarded later when Brady Martin, Travis Hayes are 18, 19, and this team is ready to.
Going to be a stud, folks. Brady Martin's going to be a stud.
Did once for the third time, as per the Soo Today article, which I'd like to talk about more next week or next time, I guess, because the holidays are next week. But like possibly bid again for the Memorial Cup in 2027. So like, yes, we'll take our bumps now.
We're talking about that, especially if, next episode. That is
the new OHL commissioner was in the Soo to watch the Niagara game. So like he had a interview with Brad, and there was an article on Soo Today. So yes, we want to make sure that we do things now to build for our future and, get the Memorial Cup back to Sault Ste. Marie. That's what all us Hounds fans want, right?
That'd be so hot to have here. I'll say that. So hot to have
Yes.
here. We need events like that here.
Oh, we do. Yeah.
We're starving for it. We're starving for it in this city. Okay. As much as it's great to have Marianas Trench come here every year and have all these different bands, it's time to get some events like the Memorial Cup. Okay. All right.
I attended Saginaw and it was like, I really enjoyed it. So yeah, that would be awesome to have here.
Good hockey here, the West, the Q. Oh, great hockey. And we would probably see if we get in 2027. Let me get this. You'd probably you wouldn't see Gavin McKenna. He'd already be in the NHL by then. But you would probably see, if he makes it, Landon Dupont. And now me and Trude's had some good conversation about Landon Dupont.
Yes,
the next Cale Makar. Saying it right now. We're going to leave it here because we don't have time to get into another topic. But Cale Makar 2.0 is coming up right now in the Western Hockey League.
Look him up.
He's 16, but he's obviously a right-handed shot defenseman from Calgary, Alberta. Who else is from Calgary? Cale Makar is from Calgary, Alberta. Just everyone wants to know that fun fact. Stud, he's 5'11". He's going to get 6'1", 6'2".
He's for the Everett Silvertips of the WHL.
And if the Buffalo Sabres continue on their trend to suck, they'll be the ones to likely get him in the draft. Sorry, Buffalo fans. That's a low blow. That's a good segue, though, because on the next segment, when I have Brendan McCarthy join, it's going to be our top shelf segment, talking things in the National Hockey League. Trude's, though, to wrap up here for our Chuck a Puck segment, Invisible Puck has been chucked. As I sit here in my festive sweater, we're going into the holidays. Truths, I want to say thank you for taking the time, my friend. It was fun. Time flies when you're having fun. And I know there's been a listener request about Peter Florio coming on. Don't worry, people. It's coming, okay? It was supposed to be this week, but he'll be here next week joining Trude's and I. And Trude's would be great, when we go to games, start getting a little bit of that. So maybe some clips live at a game. Maybe that's going to happen in the new year as well. But that aside, again, thanks for taking the time as always. And I hope you have a great holiday. But we'll be in touch if big news happens throughout the holiday. We'll make sure to give the listeners some interaction opportunity if something happens during the holidays.
Yep, can't wait. Happy holidays, everybody. Happy holidays to you, Dave. And we'll talk to you. We'll talk to you very soon.
Awesome. Awesome. I love each week.
It's a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
You have a different background each week. I love that, by the way.
Yeah, I got to move around a lot. Yeah, I
love it. I love it. You keep it interesting. Me, this doesn't change. Okay.
Who knows where I'll be next time?
Yeah. You might be outside next time.
Maybe.
Maybe outside on the roof if it's a nice night. I don't know. Yeah.
We could do vote. Where would you like to see me next?
Or maybe we'll be in a studio doing it. Oh,
maybe that would be great.
Yeah. Who knows?
All
right, Trudes. Thank you. And again, we'll be right back here on the Game Sports Podcast. Brendan McCarthy is going to be joining me to join and discuss, top shelf segment with the National Hockey League. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the Game Sports Podcast. Dave McCaig continuing to host you this evening. I am joined by the one, the only Brendan McCarthy, my man from the GTA area. How are you, my friend? Good to see you.
Davey, I'm doing well, my friend. I just crushed a nice steak and some noodles. Sometimes when we record at 6, I always get like a hankering for food, like 5 p.m. onwards. So I'm like, should I eat before or after? So I was like, it's sitting there, it's waiting for me. Should I wait? But I'm like, no, pre-pod meal, we'll call it. And glad I did because I'm fired up, ready to go. Not gonna lie, when I came home from work, I had to, from this morning, continue to shovel the entry to my driveway because the plow went by here in the Soo and scraped up all the snow that put up onto the driveway. And it was a couple feet up to my high waist of snow this morning. When I go outside at 7:15, have to be at work for 8. So I had to just send some curse words, shoveling snow. And I shoveled just half of it. And instead of, like, my wife and I carpool, so instead of taking my truck, we took her car, and because I've made this little exit, so her car can just get through the exit, so I don't have to do the entire thing. So I came home, finished that, and then I sat on the couch just to relax, and that relax turned into a quick song. I was your alarm to remind you we got a recording. You were the alarm, and she woke me up, thankfully, at 10:02 to so I can do my little. Get into the mode for the podcast. Pre-pod mellow. Yeah, you had the pre-pod meal. I had the pre-pod zonk. Yes. Absolute sleep.
All right, so we got a sporadic amount of hockey news to get into, and obviously Trudeau and I touched on a little bit of the World Juniors too, but I wanted to make sure that I incorporated it as a full wide scope because obviously we centralized it from a local perspective here in Sault Ste. Marie. So to talk about it in a whole scope, we'll get into that on the last part of the segment. I want to open up with the National Hockey League and get into those updates. And obviously you and I are Toronto fans. It's right above here. I have jerseys right here, and I have my custom one from when I was 13 years old. I got that jersey down there, that custom one. So we know who we cheer for. And there is news to talk about for them. We talk about all teams, but there is news to talk about for the Maple Leafs that is breaking news from one of their, best players that have been up to this point in the season. Anthony Stolarz, is going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks for a knee procedure. And it's not uncommon for Stolarz to miss time for injury. He's had injuries the past couple of years. He's missed a good deal of time. And he's going to be out for another 4 to 6 weeks. And Joseph Woll is going to be the guy who's taking the bull by the horns going forward for the next 4 to 6 weeks, which is very pivotal in the National Hockey League season, right? You obviously got the Christmas break, which they don't get too much of a break at Christmas. They have a couple days off before they play. The only upcoming break really that they see from action is in February for the Four Nations, right? That they really see for break in action. And that's when Stolarz will be back, if not back a bit before that. So Wall is going to have a good heavy load to deal with here. Give me your take on that. Give me your take.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Stolarz in previous years. I mean, before signing in Toronto, he's effectively just been a backup. So his body of work has increased greatly this year. And, I'm not going to speculate and say that factored into the injury, but in terms of his workload, like basically the keys were handed to him. And he was relied upon heavily the last stretch of games. So he's been excellent, but also in terms of the timing, it's actually okay. I mean, if this were to happen in February or March or, down the stretch, then you start sweating. And if you're the GM, you're, kind of shaking in your boots a little bit. So The timing is okay. It's 4 to 6 weeks. Apparently it's a quote procedure. So I feel like, it's just something to get done now and they don't want to wait on this. And this gets them back probably ready to go between the pipes mid-Jan, maybe a little bit closer to later Jan, early Feb. But you know what? Who cares, Davey? Because you mentioned earlier, too, with the Four Nations Cup in February, that'll give them some time as well. So luckily for the Leafs, for the first time in a while, they do have some great goalie depth. It's an awesome opportunity for Joe Woll to step in the driver's seat and say, okay, let me see what I can do here. Let me save the team. Let me make sure that the teammates, coach, and GM look at me and think, okay, yeah, we can roll with this guy if we're in a pinch. And it's been a tough road for Joseph Woll late too. Remember, he got injured in Game 6 against the Bruins. Couldn't go about an hour till puck drop. Couldn't go for Game 7. Had a tough start to this season too. He missed a stretch of games as well. So it's time for Joe Woll to strap in and say, okay, this is my team for the next couple of weeks and into the new year. So a good opportunity for Woll, and obviously you got the Hildebys too in the support role too for relief if necessary.
So what I thought, and we were talking about this off air too, and I think this is a very unique opportunity as well. Sorry, as I adjust my headset there, it's a very unique opportunity as well for Matt Murray as well, who people may forget that the Leafs still have Matt Murray. Okay, so there's your reminder that the Leafs still have Matt Murray on their team. They signed him to a 1-year league min this year to be kind of what Martin Jones was to the Toronto Maple Leafs last year, that third goalie depth piece. However, obviously the Hildebeest has come up, and he's been basically the guy who's the third guy to go if Stolarz can't and or Woll can't, right? So Hildebeest had just under a handful of games to this point, and he's likely now going to see more action. But my honest opinion is I'm a fan of goaltender developments, and the patience that they've had with Hildeby, I think, has been terrific. A lot of teams, unless you come up in your Martin Brodeur right away in the American Hockey League, which you don't see. They haven't seen that, which arguably since Carey Price, we haven't seen that with goaltender development. So I think goaltender development is so imperative that you don't rush them in today's game. And ultimately, I think that when it comes to Hildeby, they should not use him in every game. I like the NHL experience, but I think they should also make sure he gets a lot of games in the American Hockey League this year. And let's face it, if he's behind Joseph Woll, he might not get those starts that are pivotal in his development. So I think having him down in the American Hockey League to start, do some games, call him up. That's the beauty of the two-way, right? It's the beauty of being able to move up and down in the lineup and have him up and down. It's great to have him in that spot. Obviously, with Matt Murray, you'd be in a bit more of a different situation. But I think having Matt Murray come on up and play in that backup role for 50%, maybe even 60% of the time, from the latter half of it. So you have Hildeby for probably the next few weeks, and then going into after the new year, maybe send him down the American Hockey League, and then have Matt Murray come up and be the support cast to Woll. I think of it from two directions. One, Murray is a Stanley Cup champion. This is a guy who's faced injury as well. This is someone who's trying to get back to the National Hockey League, and I still think he has the athleticism and the ability to play in the National Hockey League. But arguably, he's the fourth goalie now. Maybe even the fifth if you want to go with the Marlies in Toronto have such good depth. But if Murray wants to come up, and let's say he's a great supporting cast, he plays a handful of games, maybe 7 or 8 games, and he goes 6-2 in those games with a 92 save percentage and a 2.50 GAA or something like that. All of a sudden, if the Leafs feel like he is a piece that can go help a team in another team at the trade deadline, maybe be a backup role that they're looking for, that becomes value on your team that you can package in a deal on a team that's maybe looking for that backup goalie for a wild card run, or even a team that if a goalie gets hurt and they need a goalie to play and Murray's ready to take in, there's an opportunity there. So there's two ends that you can take. You can take the trade approach if he does well, and it just gets him back into the National Hockey League because of the potential that he truly has. So I hope that they do give Murray that opportunity to come up and play even a bit more than 50% and allow Hildeby to have some games in the National Hockey League, but to also continue playing a lot of games in the American Hockey League. So I think it's pivotal for his development.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point, Dave. I think he could get a shot. I mean, right now he is the four stringer. I think they're really happy with Woll and Hildeby, especially considering their size, like Stolarz, Woll, Hildeby. It's like 3 Titans who have been, all collectively playing pretty well for the Maple Leafs. And I think with Murray, like for me, maybe I'm still hungry. This is why I'm using this analogy, but I'm kind of thinking it's kind of like, ordering bread and butter at a 5-star Italian restaurant. Like, you don't need it. It's there. And you're probably going to fill up on the apps and the entrees. It's there if you want it, if you're that hungry. But I think at this point, I don't think Trey Living is going to make a trigger decision just because of Stolarz. Maybe if it was months or if this was a longer period of time, then you think, okay, maybe we give this guy a shot. But like, Woll has been better. And Hildeby, I still think is pretty solid as the third guy. So I'm sure if you're Matt Murray, you're looking up and I'm like, damn, like all 3 have actually been okay. There's not really a spot for me right now. And it's tough because he's playing in the Marlies and this is a 2-time Cup champ. So I'm sure sometimes he's like, geez, I'm playing with a bunch of scrubs and a bunch of guys who are never going to make it. And I've hoisted Lord Stanley. But this is where we are right now. And this is the competition the Leafs brass have been salivating for. I love that word, salivating for, in terms of the goalie depth, right? And like, we haven't had it in a while. The Leafs haven't had it in a while. So I don't think it's going to happen. It's a fair point. But if this Stolarz injury, I mean, obviously this year, the Leafs have been a little hush-hush about things. They'll say day-to-day for a broken leg. So maybe we get to mid-January and they're like, actually, it's going to be another 2 weeks. And then it lingers on into like 4 Nations Cup window. So we'll see. There's a possibility. And like you said, is it a 2-way for Murray?
Yeah, I understood, I thought it was a 1-way for Murray, but
or 1-way.
I'll look up his context. That's why if you call him up, if you do call him up, there's a risk of having him get claimed on waivers, right?
On waivers, right?
On waivers. So I'd have to say 1-year contract, Murray contract, 1-way or 2-way. I'm cooking it up right now, but I think
Sorry to put you on the spot, but
you're good. So it is. So he did sign. So when they did re-sign him, it says a 1-year contract is what the Maple Leafs website says, and it states 1 year. It's a 1-way contract. So like he's been sent down, but he cleared waivers, right?
Right.
like Martin Jones when he cleared waivers, and then he can go up and down. So there is that ability.
Right.
But again, it's a unique situation. They can do whatever they want. And if Wall gets hurt, if you're a Leaf fan, knocking on wood for you, and you have Hildeby go in, you have somebody who's been an NHL Stanley Cup champion back you up and be a veteran piece to Hildeby. So that depth is great to have, and it's never a problem. And their depth goes beyond that. Tikhonov, I pronounced his last name wrong, that the goaltender that they have. I'm not even going to try to read.
He's been great. Yeah.
He's been great too. So there's potential there to see a lot of tremendous goaltending in Toronto, and Leaf fans, I know that myself and Brendan are very excited about it, and you should be, because this goaltending depth hasn't been there. Even when they had Joseph, Eddie Belfour, Frederick Anderson, okay, they never really had that solid second guy that you can say, yes, you know what, if this guy got hurt, I'm confident. I'm confident that we would still be successful as a team if you're speaking as Leaf brass. So this is exciting to see if you're a Leaf fan, and there's a lot of options. But Stolar's taking the time. It's the perfect time for it to happen. That was a very good point, Brendan. Very good point. Now, they played the Sabres the other night, the lonely Sabres. And this team, every year, it seems like, every year sucks. Let's just say it. I'm going to be loose and unprofessional about it. Say they've been shit. They've been shit. They have such. I'm a huge Owen Power fan. Love Owen Power. I'd like tall, that two-way defenseman that can be defense, but also provide a little bit of offense with a cannon from the point. He's a big body defense. I talked with this on the previous episode of the podcast when I was on the Chuck-a-Puck segment. I talked about I like a defenseman that is over 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", that is big, but I like my defensive stats to be about 3 two-way defensemen, 2 defensive defensemen, and 1 offensive defenseman. That's how I would build my defensive core if I was a GM. Okay, defensive defenseman, 1 guy would play with an offensive guy, the other guy would play the other two-way, then you have 2 two-way guys together, okay? Owen Power defines to me, he is leaning towards more of a defensive defenseman the way he's been playing, but he's got to stick to that two-way play. But you have Darlene on there. You got Power. You got Dylan Cousins. You have young talent on that. Levi in net is a stud. Luukkonen in net is great to have. Remember how good he was for Finland? This goalie had the potential, was unbelievable coming up. The Sabres have lost over 10 games at the time of this podcast, and they have been struggling. It is hard to watch if you're a Buffalo fan, and if you're a regular fan of any other team, you're saying, oh, this is a cakewalk for us to win tonight. It shouldn't be, because I actually like how Buffalo's built. I think they have potential in that team to be better, but they have been shitty, Brendan. Very bad.
That organization is a complete disaster right now. I was listening to Lindy Ruff's comments after the game to Toronto. He looked like he wanted to cry. He said he's at a loss for words right now. And apparently the owner flew into Montreal, where they're playing tonight. We're recording this December 17th. And he flew in to the Bell Center and said, hey, guys, we're all good, trying to keep the morale high, trying to keep the spirits high. And I'm like, oh, my God, are you kidding me? Like, this team, they don't have the it factor. In terms of fans spending their hard-earned coin to go see them play, I've been to an away game and for Leafs and Sabres in the KeyBank Center. Sorry, I spaced on the name. The KeyBank Center. I was there last year to see Matthew's 60th. And honestly, man, like, Sabres fans were getting shredded, like absolutely shredded. And the thing is, when you're so bad, you don't really have a lot to give. So they were just sitting there taking it, laughing. But like teams that, maybe have a more of a storied franchise or a good, like the Habs, they're not good this year, but a storied franchise. The fans are so passionate, they will give it back. And they also have cups to flex on anybody else. But the Sabres, man, like, the team, ownership, the fans, it's a complete dumpster fire right now. And they actually, like, were playing the Leafs pretty well. Obviously, sometimes the Leafs, it's classic Leafs, they make poor teams look better than they actually are. But I actually thought they played okay, or maybe because the Leafs were still felt like they were still coming home on that bird from Detroit. Kind of a turnaround game from Saturday night. But, man, like, that would have been great for them to edge out a game against Toronto, and now they're winless in their last 10. So it's just it's absolutely brutal right now, man. Like they don't have an it guy. The players are fed up. The coach is at a loss for words. Ownership is trying to keep the morale high. No, this is brutal. It's gonna be another failed season, and they haven't made the playoffs since what, 2011?
Yeah.
It's been a shit show.
And truly, Gavin McKenna. Okay, these are James Hagens. Obviously, McKenna's not this year. But you have Hagens this year, who we get to watch the World Juniors. This is actually a pretty good segue to our final topic before we wrap up, I think. But the Buffalo Sabres have the ability this year where, right now they're 11-16, and I believe 2 is their record right now. Sorry, just saying that, I don't have stats in front of me, but I believe it's that. Montreal has essentially a similar record to them, right? And in the bottom of the basement this year, if you get first overall, I think Hagens is a great player, but obviously there's other players who could go. The draft pick that you want, obviously, is next year, right? That I think McKenna is going to be that talent that Bedard should be. It could be, will be, whatever way you want to look at it. And they're cousins, which is great, which is absolutely hilarious. But the point that I'm making is, I think this year, if you get a top 3 pick, you can draft a good prospect. You top 5, you're going to get a good. I think Hagens is the guy, in my opinion, this year, that a team, and he is projected to be one. But this is a team in Buffalo that I say next year, and the reason why I brought up next year is because they don't want to have that opportunity. Buffalo is fed up with losing, having lottery picks and having these guys, because a lottery pick isn't a sure thing. It doesn't matter if you have the first overall pick, unless you're getting a McDavid or a Crosby or even a Matthews generational talent, and you just get somebody who is just a regular first overall pick. And I don't mean to say regular, but when I see Hagens, I don't see Crosby. I don't see McDavid, right? I see someone who's going to be a top 6 forward in your organization. Absolutely. But will it be like the effect that Slafkovsky's had on Montreal so far? Is that the type of draft we're going to see this year with the top few picks? So I think Buffalo fans, they want to see a run this year, but they're not going to see it. And like I said, next year, you're not going to even want to think about McKenna because you want to start making the playoffs. You're fed up with not making the playoffs. You're fed up with all these rebuilds and plans. There has to be a plan in place that shifts the Buffalo organization from a whole culture perspective, but also to try to draft better players and sign players and build around some of the young core that they have, because I like some of their pieces. Power, Dahlin. I love a lot of their pieces that they have. There's just not that guy, that it guy. And they're at a very unique time in the Atlantic that is very stacked. Toronto, Florida, Boston is still good. Tampa is still good. Ottawa's up and coming. Montreal is rebuilding. Detroit is up and coming. There's a lot going on, and Buffalo's on the outside looking in. And the way that they're progressing, they can have another 10 years where they don't see playoff hockey if they don't right the ship there, my honest opinion. So to transition to our final topic, went a little bit extra here, but we'll get into the World Juniors. The World Juniors, from a full scope perspective, I'm excited about this year's World Juniors. I think Canada has a lot of exciting pieces. I think there's a lot of teams that are going to be pretty even throughout. You think of Canada, you think of Sweden, you think of Finland, you think of the States. I think Czechia has a very good team this year too. I think there's even 5 teams is what I mentioned there that could make some noise in this for World Juniors. But obviously, I think this could be a year where Canada kind of rebounds back from last year's quarterfinals. But some standout players, Brendan, that I'm thinking of: Gavin McKenna, James Hagens, and Axel Sandin-Pellikka. Okay, I'm a big fan of Axel, the Detroit Red Wing pick. He's going to be a stud. Detroit has some studs on that back end, right? Edvinsson, Seider, Sandy, awesome. But Hagens, projected top pick in this year's draft upcoming. McKenna, 2 years. We might be able to see, or we're going to see McKenna for the next 2 years, right? The World Juniors, which is going to be very exciting. I think there's a lot of even talent this year.
Yeah, and just from a broader scope, broader picture of things too. I mean, Canada, like, really disappointing showing last year, right? Like, they didn't even make it into the top 4. And for years, like, Canadians have been spoiled with almost automatically a run to the gold medal game. And obviously the year they had Bedard, they won it in Halifax. And then last year it was really disappointing. And you lose, and obviously you're seeing the States win too, like your biggest rival. So I think Canada has a pretty loaded roster this year. I was reading today that as a little bit of a team bonding trip, they went to a military base in Petawawa just to kind of do this little simulator thing to make it look like you were like actually like on the front lines and in battle. And listening to the guys talk about it after, like for one thing, it should remind them, because they're young guys and all they care about is winning, but it should remind them that hockey is secondary, that there's people who actually put their life on the line. So it probably puts it in perspective for them. And also, I think it could probably like provide them a little bit of motivational incentive. Just be like, we want to win for our troops because these are the real heroes. And I think it's important, for team bonding trips. NHL, it doesn't matter the level, but for especially young guys, just to bond with the team, get to know each other, and also have experiences that actually are going to impact you. So I think that was really cool. I was reading that today. I thought that was really, really cool that they did that.
Cool.
Dave Cameron, the head coach, was speaking on it, and the players seem to really, really enjoy it. So, and also this year it's in Ottawa, so you got to think that they show up in a Canadian city. I think they go all the way this year. I think it's going to be Canada, US, and it's going to be an absolute banger.
See, and obviously, co-host of the show, Alex Parr, is at the New Year's Eve game between the States and Canada. That is pretty epic game to go to. Obviously, he lives in Ottawa and gets the chance to go see the World Juniors. It's definitely a great year to go. And for just kind of recap purposes, and you can predict, obviously, I want to hear who you think's going to win it all. Obviously, you did say that, as you kind of spoiled there with Canada, but I'm going to say from a standings perspective, Group A is going to go Canada, US, Finland, Germany, and Latvia. I have Germans over Latvia. A lot of people aren't going to even love to Germany, but I'm going to put Latvia at the bottom. From Group B, I see Sweden, Slovakia, Czechia, Switzerland, and Kazakhstan finishing last in the Group B. In the final four, Final four, I see Canada, Sweden, US, and Czechia, though. Okay. I'm a fan of Czechia. I know I put them even a little bit lower, like from the 2-3 spot. But I'm going to have to say that Canada is going to be playing the finals against Sweden, though, Brendan. And I'm going to give Canada the win over Sweden this year, with US getting the bronze. How about yourself?
So that's a good pick with Czechia. I think they'll be up there. I don't think they'll medal, but I could see them finishing maybe fourth. I think Sweden will be good. Again, they were a finalist last year. I think they'll be up there as well. But I think it's going to be Canada, US in the final. And I love my Canadian boys. Obviously, I'm Canadian, but heart says Canada, gut says US sneaks one out and go back to back. So I'm actually going to give it to the States. I think they're pretty stacked this year. And obviously, they got that Hagens kid who you alluded to a couple moments ago. And he's projected to go top 3 in the draft in 2025. So look out for the States. They're coming for a back-to-back chips.
And fun fact, Trey Augustine's the best goalie in this tournament. And he is the States goaltender, Detroit draft pick. Detroit getting these gems in the draft, eh? The Red Wings, here we go. Back in the day when they get all these good draft picks, we're going to start seeing it. And it's going to be so annoying. Hopefully all the fans enjoy Detroit not being that good for a while, because the Yzer plan is going to work one day, you watch, and it's going to be all these draft picks are wild. And Augustine isn't the best goalie in the draft, in my opinion. Okay, so you got the States, I got Canada. Let us know what you think below. And Brendan, last question, and we're only going to do one kind of quiz answer question kind of type that we do. Obviously, we do the redraft blind rankings. We spend some time on it, but today with time constraints, we're going to just do the one question, and it's a start, bench, cut question that I'm giving you. And it might be easy, might not, but it's a Four Nations edition, okay? But it still ties into the World Juniors coming up, okay? Because it's still on the international stage, and this was something that I wanted to ask you last week, but obviously time constraints. Start, bench, cut. Connor Hellebuck, Jake Ottinger, Jeremy Swayman. All 3 USA goaltenders.
Start, bench, cut. That's a great question. Yeah, because I think I ended off my point on our previous pod on how just crazy that depth was, basically comparing them to like a rotation in baseball. Start, bench, cut. Okay. You got to ride the hot hand. I got to start Helly. Like he's been great this year.
Yeah.
I feel like Swayman is a bit of a sassy character given his holdout this year to get the bag. So I'm gonna cut that guy. I'm gonna cut him. I don't know. He gives off kind of a sassy character impression to me. So I'm gonna cut him, and that means I'm gonna have Ottinger on the bench.
Very good choices either way all around, but I will have to agree with you. I think that's also the rotation I go with. And Swayman, we know that he's struggling this year, and he's probably missing his hugs with Allmark. Maybe that's
Yeah.
Swayman's. I've been missing his little post-game hugs. But jokes aside, that start bench cut, when we're back from the holidays, I'll make sure to make it up to you. But I will ask you one more thing to put you on the spot. Your most favorite World Junior moment?
I got to go to 2009. I was just coming home from a family vacation, and my grandpa was watching the game, and we had missed everything just because we had flight disruptions and whatnot. But we came home for the most important part. It was obviously the Jordan Eberle tying goal and the iconic words of Gord Miller, "Can you believe it?" And that was awesome. I believe I was in grade 8, and yeah, it was just it was awesome. And considering how we practically could have missed that game, but we tuned in just for the most important moment, most important play, and one of the most iconic moments, if not the iconic moment in World Junior history for the Canadians. Pretty cool, and it's something I'll never forget.
I am going to have to agree. And you know what? I know it's kind of a sad note to put it on if you're a Canadian fan, but my least favorite moment is when Marc-Andre Fleury let in that goal in overtime. He had a very bad performance at the World Juniors back in 2003. I want to say that was the year. Don't quote me. It doesn't matter because I try to delete it from my brain. But I could not agree. That Eberle goal is iconic. Brendan, my friend, we want a little bit extra today, but that's okay. It's, you know what, we're going into the holidays. We have 2 weeks off. We're going to be back after the New Year's. Any breaking news, of course, we'll hop on and do some clips and interactions with our listeners. But besides that, I want to say thank you for taking the time tonight, and also happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and all that fun stuff that's going to be upcoming in the next couple days.
Thanks, Dave. Happy holidays, man.
Awesome. That's been Brendan McCarthy. I want to say thank you very much to Jordan Trudeau. And also to you, the listeners, make sure you like, follow, subscribe on all the platforms of the Game Sports Podcast through Spaces, that's through Village Media and Soo Today, or on 91N, that's 91 Network on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you are, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, we're all over the place. You should find us to type in the Game Sports Podcast on Google as well. And we'll be back not until after the New Year. So our next show, just to remind everybody, right now we're recording, this is December 17th with an 18th upload. We plan to be back on January the 8th, 7th or 8th, around that. So we're going to have 2 weeks off for our annual holidays that we have at the end of the year for this time. And we'll talk to you in 2025. On behalf of everyone here on the game, I'm going to remind you, keep your stick on the ice, swing your bats, catch touchdowns, drain your threes, and shoot your shots. Booyah.